Hey everyone.
Hey,
This is Samantha,
this is Shiva.
and we're here in, can I show them? Ottawa, Canada, at the University of Ottawa. And we wanted to share our presentation with our home communities.
Yeah, we are discussing about Poittu Varen ethics. This is something very important to both of us as well as for our families and communities back in India and US. So we felt that instead of sharing with in the academic platform, sharing more with our own communities, that's like ensuring the values and ethics which we share on each other.
Yeah. One thing we wanted to share too is that this project, this presentation, came out of a friendship and colleagueship over several years that
And scholarship.
That included both a lot of care for one another and for the people around us, and also harm for between each other and people we cared about who had to learn through our mistakes.
Yeah, learn from our life experiences.
Yeah. So this is going to be a sharing, both scholarly and honest, about what we learned from the relationship.
Yeah,
So,
and I think this is a very important time to acknowledge and convey our gratitude to like a couple of people, particularly like a couple of organizations and people. One is Child Leader Project in the USA, and now the new team is leading. Congratulations to the new team.
thank you to Elizabeth Ayala, who is the new Executive Learner Director of Child Leader Project USA, keeping it alive for a few years now.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful to two organizations back in India. One is Trust for Youth and Child Leadership, and Mughal Social Welfare Organizations. The kind of translocal collaborations and the transnational collaboration which we are having with different levels. It's something so important to us, and my sincere gratitude to both the team members.
So we're going to go ahead and go through our presentation, and we'll tell you more about that at the end of why we're doing this. And please feel free to write questions. We can see when people are watching, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
It feels good to see all of your names. But go ahead and write questions, and we're just going to talk to you and talk to each other as we go through our presentation.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Yeah, there you go. So this is how we started our friendship, and I think one fine day evening I was walking on the beach and I saw like some white girl looking at group of kids playing on the seashore. Then I said like, what? Do you like kids? That's where we started having a conversation about us and our work. And I think like after 15 minutes, she ended up in my village. And I think Samantha has to share more of like how was her experience with my village.
Yeah. So, I mean, Shiva and I met in a really strange way. I was, again, sitting on the beach, and then he just approached me. I was on this random beach that I felt like I had to drive out to while I was doing work with Child Leader Project and in India. And I'm sitting there on the beach, and then suddenly this random person walks up to me and asks if I like working with children. Now, you have to know, some of you know my story, that I was already working in India for about a year and a half, maybe, with Amala. Shout out to Amala. And we were looking for ways to develop the organization to be much more rooted and much more owned by the community in India. So suddenly this man walks up to me on the beach, and it turns out that this person is 1 month apart in age. So we were born, we're both 30 years old now.
Yeah.
I think we were 23 or 22 at the time.
22.
So we're 22 years old, and we were born on opposite sides of the planet, 1 month apart.
Yeah.
We grow up in completely different communities.
Different continent.
Completely different continent. I'm out in Riverside, Moreno Valley, California. He's out in...
Yeah, in one small coastal village in Villapuram district of Tamil Nadu in South India. And that's very, very different component, or like a different kind of life which we undergone in a like 20 years
Mm-hmm.
of life, and learning similar things in our own life experiences, and kind of coming together and sharing our own life experiences on each other in my own village was the like maybe connecting point for us in 2009.
Yeah, because at that point we were working on doing programming in Chennai and Trichurapalli. Shout out to all the youth who are on Facebook from those organizing that we did. And at that time, though, I was doing college visits with youth, and Shiv and I meet, and he's like, okay, I'll go with you. And without knowing me, he just jumped in a bus, me and Amala, and said, okay, I'll go. And then without knowing him, I jumped on a motorcycle and followed him to his village to see the kind of organizing.
That's where I'm finding it like a kind of the one important core element of trust, and the mutual trust on each other, how we can really rely on one another.
Yeah.
And I think that's where this first image is connecting us as like the mutual trust.
Yeah. And then each of these images is from over the course of the relationship. So the heart of this presentation is that what we're sharing with you is completely rooted in lived experience of relationship. And a relationship over the last 8 years that has gone through so many ups and downs. And that what got us to want to make this presentation was to ask, how is it that you have a relationship with someone when you both inherit like colonial, neoliberal, and systemic oppressions that really would normally keep you separate from each other.
Yeah.
And the pressure of those oppressions at any point in time when we have conflict or are causing harm between each other would normally just rupture the relationship
and break the relationship.
So we started asking ourselves recently, like, how are we still friends? How is it that through the friendship that we've had and the mistakes we've made and these histories that we've both inherited, how the hell are we still friends? So decolonizing relationship. So here are 3 things we think helped us stay friends and that we hope help other transnational organizers.
And translocal organizers.
Which is our first thing. So we're calling this process a grounded ethic. So we're calling this a grounded ethic, which is emerging from the idea of grounded theory, which is a kind of research methodology that uncovers theory not by coming in with a theory beforehand, but by observation and engagement, and through the observation and engagement unearths what the theory is by lived experience. So then we thought, what is our grounded ethics of being in relationship given the systems around us? I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think it's a very important thing which everybody should understand is like from our own life experiences, our own lived experiences, how do we like uncover our own ethics, which like we can also like see that ethics in a praxis of practice, theory and practice, and that maybe like it gives you like a kind of new methodology of like a grounded ethics.
So here's 3 points that we think are really that we would want to, if any young transnational leaders came up to us and said, I just met a random person on the beach and we're going to do some international youth organizing together. Me and Shiva would say, okay, here's
That's totally possible.
here's 3 things that we think are useful for you. One is that Child Leader Project and Trust for Youth and Child Leadership was actually not just a transnational project, at least, again, noting that I'm not in charge of it anymore. So this is what I remember during the work that I did, is that we called it transnational, which we thought was really radical at the time. But as Shiv and I talked, we're like, actually, this wasn't transnational, this was translocal. And we're taking that word from writing by Crady and Murphy, who are actually reflecting on Clifford Geertz, anthropologist, cultural anthropologist. And this quote is so good that we're actually going to go like this. So, Shiva, would you read the top quote?
The local needs to be understood as the space where global forces become recognizable in form and practice as they are enmeshed in local human subjectivity and social agency. This is like enlightenment in always multifaceted, part of accommodation and part of resistance. Sometimes overhead and other times latent. And therefore can only be understood through an ethnographic thick description focused on an intricate understanding of the encounter between local life and global forces.
So when we started to prepare or reflect on our work, we were like, it wasn't transnational per se, because when I think transnational, I think what we were trying to say is, our group is coming from U.S., you are in India. We are both from different countries, so we were talking about transnational in that way. But what we realized is actually, no, you were from a particular village. You were actually from a particular city, and then you were from particular villages, and so were the youth. And the youth that we're organizing in the United States, similarly, were not just people from the United States. They were people from California, from Riverside, and then from the neighborhood of Arlanza. And so the power in Translocal is that it challenges this idea of the center and the periphery, which is a kind of common global idea that there's a center of power and then there's a periphery to power. It really complicates that idea to say that actually our locales, the two places where we live and breathe and drink water and grow food, actually experience global forces in different kinds of ways, but that when we root ourselves in our certain locations, in multiple locations, it allows us to explore how the global impacts both locations. And then we get to be dialogue partners.
Yeah, and also I just recollecting from the Chilisa's work of how do we recognize this local and indigenous knowledges, and how it's very highly influencing us on a global perspective. So most of the time the global, the colonial, the knowledge and practices and theory and methodologies are always oppressing the local and indigenous knowledges. I think when we are started recognizing this translocal perspective or translocal acknowledgement, that helps and enables the more of local and indigenous knowledges to be on the global force. I think that's one thing which is important between this our hard time. It helps us to understand what is meant by the translocal to us, and whether we are an international organization or we are a transnational organization or we are a translocal organization. How do we respect each other on their own spaces, as well as how do we acknowledge their their local knowledge, and how do we share this this power between one another. And I think that's something very important for any organization who's going to take maybe translocal or transnational partnerships. I think you need to look at what is your translocal, the shared values and ethics which you're going to hold it with you.
Yeah. I think too, translocal for me, especially from a US context, where the story about international or transnational work is so often about people going somewhere else that quote unquote need help or something like that kind of story. That's the center periphery story. And how that this complicates it is actually that places the emphasis back on whose are you? And it challenges the idea that you go somewhere else at all, but that right underneath your feet in your location is how you gain and process your belonging. So programs that send people abroad without any concept of who they are in their soil, in their water, in their community, in their family, are missing the opportunity for what is essential translocal dialogue. Because I remember one thing that we used to say is, oh, maybe we shouldn't do this at all. You're like, oh, you should just stay in your local communities, people shouldn't travel or do international work. I don't think we agree with that. I think that if we don't act in dialogue with each other, someone else will do it on our behalf, and they'll do it in a way that will not be towards life-giving means and life-generating means.
That's something important. I think when you're moving to the next piece of our work, then you understand how the power the other organizations are taking it with. So that is something important for us, like seeing this international organizations, how the power has been shared between one another. It's most of the time like there's a relationship between the international organizations, like maybe the donor agency who's like maybe sharing the some resources and asking them to implement it, and often has failed to like acknowledge the indigenous knowledge and culture and values and ethics which need to be followed. And the kind of power they always have, like this colonial power, which they always like, maybe sometime it may be European, or like it may be the American, or it may be the, like a white into like a rooting into the local area and implementing, like whether that may be like a coordinative approach or maybe collaborative or maybe like very conventional partnership between donor agency and implementing partner. And I would like strongly like suggest that what is like a power sharing between these two organizations. Like one thing which we always like see between each other as part of our experience, and one is like I have like much more like a local knowledge and indigenous knowledge, and I may not be having like a sufficient resources to do it, and I'm like much more like a local language, and when Samantha and the entire CLP team is coming and they may not be knowing the local languages, they may not be having a local connections networks, and they don't know the local language, but they may be having like some like other lived experience from their own local community, where we can have a dialogue between these two, that acknowledging and recognizing each other's power in a mutual way.
Yeah.
And that's something important, like taking and recognizing each other's power.
One thing we would recognize is that we have unequal power flowing based on our different identities. So, for example, we would acknowledge that when I'm in India, I carry white skin privilege. So then we would say, okay, we have this resource, which is this white skin privilege. How do we use this resource to further what is most important to the people who are involved? And so we would constantly say, let's acknowledge the kind of unequal power flows, and then use it to create more power and to disrupt unequal power, to break through doorways, literally. To create programs, to move resources, to generate more power for the people involved through our relationship. So I think one thing we're suggesting here is that acknowledge the power together, and then go, how are we going to move and share the power?
And also recognize that the power is always unequal.
Yeah.
And it's not like an equal power which is existing all across the globe.
Yeah.
It's more of unequal, and that unequal has to be much more equitable way.
Yeah, so there was no like foolishness around like we're equal, like we live in this world where everything's perfect. It's not.
It's not at all.
No.
It's not at all.
No, and when we would harm each other, we would use the power we had. When we were healing each other, we had the power we had. And so to acknowledge where the power is with each other clearly, and then to be intentional about let's move this power for good.
I think you want to read this.
We recognize and mobilize the different assets we bring to this relationship, including unequal power. I am committed. I will use my power to care for what you value. So I will act in service, in collaboration with you towards what you value. Here's our third one. I will flip it again for people. If you want to go ahead and talk about it.
So, as I said in the past, like when international organizations can function at a coordinative and collaborative and cooperative levels, and ours has emerged as a result of personal relationship, and how one personal relationship can transform in a multi-layer perspective. Look at like an individual level, look at a family level, look at a community level, look at an organizational level, and look at a transnational level. Like this is like I'm seeing in a multinational, multi-layer perspective. That's possible only when you have like a shared individual values and life ethics, and commitment to learning, and the mutual learning, commitment for like recognizing the people whom we care about, and also commitment to the process which you are taking up for like upliftment or empowerment of other people whom we care about it. So when we follow the shared the values and life ethics, maybe that maybe helps us to break the existing or conventional the pattern of partnerships. So how it's not a care about the people in general, it's much more people in very particular to like as an individual sense, like as an individual, as a Shiva has its own family, and Shiva has its own like community, Shiva has its own like people, the organization and the group of people Shiva's care about, particularly youth and children of this work. And so if I found the same thing with Samantha, like if she is also recognizing my values and my life ethics, and they care about the people whom I care about it, then that's where like this, I think that's where something is keeping our friendship alive till today. And that's what like we really wanted to other people to take it from this whole piece of presentation. And I think you want to add something.
Yeah, I think what I appreciate about this concept is that the personal relationships formed the core of the organization, rather than the organization forming the core by which all the personal relationships happened. What I think is beautiful about that is I do think it's honest. I think even when we say that an organization holds people together, I think it's actually relationships. Yeah. And when we say an organization failed people, we're actually saying relationships were harmed or broken, which led to the organization breaking apart or stretching. So I think it's actually more honest just to say like relationships are the foundation of collaborative work. Organizations, I just came from a restorative justice conference where restorative justice particularly acknowledges that laws do not get harmed, relationships get harmed.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the core of our work being relational, we're talking about a kind of an honesty that you have to continually tend the sacred relationships between people if you want the organization to survive. The other piece I would say about this is that I think it resulted in a different kind of organizing model where people's families were involved. Yeah. People's whole web of relationships were recognized as, wow, if we want to do community-based organizing translocally together, then we need to know and love each other's families.
Yeah.
So.
And there's two things which I would like to highlight here. One is how whether it's a project-centered or people-centered. Yeah. So when we are like initiating any transnational initiative or translocal initiatives, that's like a one which we strongly believe is it should be people-centered. Whether it's a people-centered at the individual level or family level or community level, whether we don't know about like we don't really like worried about like the structure which we carry as an organization, but the people who are part of the structure is more important. So I think that's we are really like practicing quite a lot in our even the TYCL work back in India is that like every single program try to engage our families into our program. So why we are inviting our families back, it's much more in a transparent and accountable way which we can do the program. And second is like ensuring like we care about the people and the people are the key for any kind of development or empowerment initiative which we are taking part.
The other thing too that I think about this is again I notice even in myself a kind of like nervousness, like no, we have to build structures that last, like organizations have to last. And to be honest, I can feel that voice inside of me going, oh, it's not about relationships. Like, did your organization last? Did your organization get bigger? Did your organization grow? And I think what we're just doing is, it's not that the organization doesn't matter. I think we're just challenging this overemphasis and saying, actually, beneath the veneer of that organization, at its best is relationships, and that if you and I are saying we're committed to challenging colonialism and coloniality, I think that it is an act of resistance to be in relationship, even when there's harm done. And so it's actually the core of interrupting a system that's designed to separate, alienate, and dominate, is to say, I refuse to be separated from you, I refuse to dominate you, and I don't want to be alienated from you, which is actually a relational act.
Yeah, and when you're looking at like this transnational approach and in a systemic perspective, then that helps us really, like, it's not when you really wanted to have like a systemic change in the communities, then like as Sam said, like you need to, like, of course we recognize.
Tell us one.
Okay, go for it.
All right. Okay, so part 1 is on my Facebook page.
And part 2 is on my Facebook page.
And we're going to wrap up here in like 5 to 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
we were just about to reveal to you that we started asking ourselves, what's the image or the phrase or the word that would capture the ethic that keeps us in relationship?
Yeah. Poittu, Varen. Go and come back. And what is Poittu Varen means to you, Sam? Like, because it's a Tamil phrase and very rhythmic and very musical and culturally bounded word. And what it means to you?
So the first time I was introduced to this phrase was actually in our friendship, as a phrase that you would say and that your mother would say before I would leave. And then you would explain to me.
I think that's we captured from my mom, it seems.
And maybe it's from your mom. But it's a phrase that gets used, and I feel like this is what you should explain. Everyone uses this phrase. This is a common phrase.
When we like living from the home for like a school or living for the office or anything, then the first, like, I think the last word which we use is Poittu Varen to our parents or like to our family members is like Poittu Varen. Like that, I said like so many people like before I leave for this trip, it's Poittu Varen. I will go and come back. So this going elsewhere and coming back to your own space is something important. I think capturing this part as our ethic. And we can, in a transnational partnership or translocal partnerships, you can go elsewhere with your relationship, with your power, with your people, but it's always you go and come back.
So I know I experience this phrase as so beautiful because it means I go, but I commit to coming back because our relationship is important to me. And the feeling tone behind it is go and come back because you're important to me, I need you in my life. And so we're like, oh, this phrase that is this kind of like loving thing that we say and that everyone says is kind of the essence of what we've been talking about. It's like this commitment. I go away, we fight, we harm, we leave, we live in different places, but I commit to returning when I'm ready because the relationship is important to me. And if you know that the person can come back, then you can go away and you can take the space and time you need. And when we started sharing this word, one time we brought youth from Arlanza Norte Vista High School. Love to them. I will tag all of you in this video. You are all some of you are graduating from college this week, which is so fun to watch. This was a word that we used when we would take Tamil classes together, and they loved this. They loved it so much, Crystal, that Crystal here, who just graduated recently from her 4-year university, made this painting that says Poittu Varen. And I think it resonated even with our youth in this like very like, right, that's the whole point of the work, is moving and returning, like this life-death life cycle, this harm and repair cycle that continues the relationship no matter what.
We are using this phrase again and again as a Poittu Varen and harm and repair. It's not like when you're having a partnership, it's not something easy and it's not always like a fun and loving. There is a like a harm as well as there is a like a repair need to be done here and there in the process of this whole partnership. So how do we do that processes that like which you are going to take you to the next phase of this presentation? And go ahead.
So last August, I felt this in my own self. We haven't spent too much time working together over the last couple of years. I left Child Leader Project in really beautiful hands. Of course, Trust for Youth and Child Leadership is flourishing, taking off. And so we're no longer working with each other, but we could both feel, I've gone, but I haven't come back. Yeah. And we were both like, wow, I know I felt in myself out in California, I really need to go visit Shiva and go, wow, let's learn from the ground of our relationship what happened. What did we learn from it? And beautifully, all the people in my life back in California were like, yeah, Shiva's important to you. My beautiful husband, shout out to Vijay, was like, yeah, Shiva's important to you. Shiva's important to me. You need to go to India. And Shiva was like, of course, I'll make 5 days clear for you. Let's sit in dialogue together and learn from the ground of our relationship. And that's how we began talking about, we came up with this methodology just in the context of living next to each other for 5 days that we're calling a grounded ethic methodology. It's like a talk story relationship process.
Yeah, this tool, like the relationship map tool, which we created together, and it's available for you. Like you can just comment on that, and then you can have your own like tool to map your own relationship with your partner. And that's something important for me as this whole the grounded ethic methodology which we mapped was, and I think there is some gap in between, like this 2-3 years of the gap in our personal life. I was like quite busy with my PhD and building the organization very strongly in the local communities. So that took me like a whole lot of my time, and we always have that feeling of where is like where is that like a Poittu between you and Samantha? Then when you are going to explore that, I think that the 5 days of the mapping process helped us to come up with or emerge this whole grounded ethic methodology, which we are happy to share with you all, and we are welcome you to practice the same.
In the brief version, what we did is for 5 days we sat in front of our Facebook account.
That's the first thing which we did.
So we went in front of our Facebook and we went on the See Your Friendship, and when you do that, all of your photos, all of the things you've ever done together shows up in a timeline. And for 5 days, we sat in front of this Facebook and we went from the beginning to the most recent to go, okay, what are the moments in our relationship that were either really connecting or very disconnecting? What was your experience of it? And then I would repeat back to him what I heard. And then I would share what my experience of it was, and he'd repeat back to me. And then we go, what are the words or images that were most important in our sharing of those different experiences? Where are the edges where we had a very different experience than each other, and where were the energies of synergy where we're like, oh, right, we really were feeling the same thing, and both of them were really valuable.
Yeah, that's, I think this kind of like social media, Facebook, it's really helped us a lot in terms of identifying our own like experiences. I look at like most of the time when we are having international partnerships, always people look at their own annual reports, or maybe look at like kind of the reports submitted by 2 organizations that are engaged. But this is something very unique, and looking at like 2 individuals, the relationship map and the timelines, and that's something giving you like a much more personalized the events and ethics together. So that maybe I think help you like whatever the mode you have in your like maintaining that relationship between the founders and maintaining relationship between the people. And I think maybe you can explore in your own way, which is like this is the way we found, and I think it's open for all. Like you can figure out on your own way.
I see a small group of people forming outside to come in next, but I think that our closing thoughts are just that this process is about the core of ethics and theories is that it emerges from relationship, and it is the product of a collective effort. That it's not just a single person, nor is it something that comes transposed from above or placed upon people, but it's something that you take the time to tend, and then I really like this word you and I are using, like we're trying to uncover the ground of our relationship to see after all these years what we've fed, what's died, what's growing, what seeds we planted, what's emerging that can be useful both to our relationship and to other relationships that work to dismantle oppressive global systems that happen on our local lives.
Yeah.
So I know that we'd be down to hear
Your
feedback,
questions and comments, and if you really look for a transnational or translocal partnerships, and I think good to map your own relationship.
Yeah.
And when you're mapping, you will understand and you will like figure out some of the most important moments and how these moments and events has created a high impact in each other's community and each other's the people on your own systems. So
And
with
if-
this,
If you want the form that we
Forms.
made, or if you want the PowerPoint, just give a private message to me or
private
Shiva.
message, then we'll happy to share with you all. And
And
thank you so
and,
much.
Poittu Varen.
Poittu Varen, and we'll be coming back to you again with new updates.
And thanks, Melissa.
Thanks to all the people who helped us in this whole period of process.